Attention to brief. Welcome to the briefing room. My name is Matt Bowman, and I'm your host for the briefing room, a show by warriors for warriors. And today I have for you a real treat. Colonel Edna Cummings. You've seen the movie, The 6888. You've heard the stories, but this is a warrior who not only served her country, but also after retirement went out and sought recognition for a group of American warriors who weren't recognized. And her efforts have resulted in a Congressional Gold Medal for the 6888. Her efforts have resulted in a documentary, a book, A Soldier's Life, and then the Tyler Perry movie about that same idea that inspired millions of Americans to learn more about the greatest generation. My producers told me to keep the show G, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to keep the show OG because it's very important that we know what really happened. We need the truth about how do you create these warriors. So if you're a CEO, an admiral, a general, a senior executive, an entrepreneur, or a student, and you're looking to raise the standards, to have a warrior's mentality on how you approach problems and how you approach life, then this show is for you. So with that, I'm bringing on my guest, Colonel Edna Cummings.
Hi.
Hey, good morning, Edna. Good morning.
Yeah.
This is their chance to see what few Americans see, kind of a one-on-one personal conversation with a warrior like you. So we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to take you back in time and go right back to your family. Tell me about, in the audience, where you're from, and what does it take to make Edna Cummings?
Yeah, I can honestly say that no one has ever asked me that question. And I think I'll just start with the last one. What does it take to make an Edna Cummings? It's kind of like baking a cake. You know, you got to break the eggs. You have to really have all the ingredients. And sometimes you add a little something extra to just make that cake yours. And it starts with my parents. I was born on a military base. In the Army, we would always say that we bleed green. And I believe it from day one. I mean, I was doing police call at 6 years old. That's all,
Okay.
Uh, I think that's a lot of it's just something I was born into. And I tell everyone that I joined the family business. But beyond that, not only was I a family member, I decided to serve because at 17, 18 years old, it seemed like something that I would never be able to do. And I just felt if I could become a second lieutenant, the rest of my life would be easy. So that was the start point, becoming a second lieutenant in the Army. But it just gave me courage. And I think that's a lot of it. And then something else, the Army and life after the Army, I learned that when you want to do something, no sometimes is just the beginning of a conversation. Sometimes no means no. However, if you have a passion for it, you'll find a way.
You
And
know, you talk
that's
about,
Mhm.
the breaking the eggs
Mhm.
and making the batter to make a
Right.
Colonel Edna Cummings. Tell me a little bit about your father, your mother, who I met, who's wonderful, and your grandparents. I really want to do a deep dive into baking this cake. Who was your father, and who was your mother, and who are your grandparents?
Well, I'll start with, of course, my mom. My mom turns 94 next year. And I said that my parents are married 71 years. My dad died in August at the age of 98. But I say that she was the push out mission. In other words, she got up before he got up at 4 o'clock in the morning when he was stationed at Fort Bragg and other military assignments, I remember, to make sure that he had everything he needed, the uniform, the nice hearty breakfast, because she knew what he would have to be up against. And then my grandparents, and I'll start with the grandparents on my mother's side, lived on a farm. And my mother said that they didn't have a lot of financial support. I mean, they were poor, but they weren't po. Po is when you have nothing. She said they were poor. And when my dad went to Vietnam back then, we had to leave Fort Bragg. And we had to leave our housing at Fort Bragg. And I lived on the farm. Literally started first grade in a one-room schoolhouse. and learn how to count on an abacus. These upright abacus where you slide the numbers over, and that's how you pass. You count it from 1 to 100 by sliding over these little beads. And I remember that, but I also remember the spirit of living on a farm. I'm talking about outdoor facilities, and I did this for a year.
Mm.
We literally lived off the land. We didn't have the traditional sliced bread. My grandmother got up every morning and made biscuits. If we wanted chicken, we went out. She killed the chicken. We
Wow.
wanted peanuts. My grandfather put the peanuts on the barn to, dry them out, and sugar cane. He would go out in the farm. You want something sweet? You ate sugar cane. So that was just the spirit. And I said they were the ultimate recyclers. Nothing was wasted.
You
And
know, today they would almost call them homesteaders, and I'm big on farming. You know that I believe
yes.
everybody should have a farm. So that
Mhm.
that early experience, and then there's a part of this show where we call it the blueprint,
Mhm.
and there are parents out there who are trying to raise a 2050 or a 2060 Colonel Edna Cummings. And so for what your mother did, that there's a couple key takeaways. Somebody's got to get up before the sunrise
Right.
to make the family day get started. Somebody has to make sure everyone is fed and the house is organized. And then you got to have a support system. So for your grandparents to take y'all in, when even back then they didn't have to do it. I mean, they could have said, "Hey, our daughter is married, her husband's in the service. They need to figure it out in Fayetteville." So it must have been a lot of family love and bonding for them to take y'all in, and not just you leave with one daughter, you come back with two. So
Mhm.
what an incredible story.
Right. Yeah, that really shaped me, and I think it grounded me. I mean, my grandparents to the left was a cotton field.
Hmm.
And I mean, I actually would go out, and I thought it was pretty cool to pick cotton, but that's, in retrospect, that was their survival. So everything on the farm, the well, the fishing pond, to the right was a fishing pond, to the left was a cotton field. And I lived like that for a year, going to school in the one-room schoolhouse, but I never forgot that experience.
And how about on your father's side?
On my father's side, I got to know them when he was stationed at Fort Gordon. Don't remember his mother. His mother died when he was very young, but my dad joined the army in 1946, right after World War II ended, and he was World War II occupation force, he reminds me. But I remember my grandfather not very well because he died when I was pretty young, but I just remember the sense of community, everybody looking out for everyone. We didn't have to worry about babysitters or childcare because the community took care of everyone. So it's just a sense of community and belonging and family that I remember from my parents and from my grandparents.
For those who don't know what life is like, from movies, you hear the term Army brat or a Navy brat, but you were an Army brat. So what was that like being an Army brat?
But basically, you do not walk on the grass. That's what I remember. And you learn how to do police call and Johnson wax because we lived in military quarters, and my father was a stickler about the floors always being buffed. It was hardwood floors. I mean, the real hardwood that you had to buff. And I remember a playground, in the back of our home in one of the places we live. And what was interesting, it was integrated.
Mhm.
And so I had friends of all races. My best friend, I think his mom was German and his dad, was white, but we were the best of friends. His name was Kiki. And I remember him waiting for my mom to finish combing my hair every day because, combing a child's hair every day, especially, as a black, as a young black girl, that's a ritual. You have to get out with your hair braided and styled, and I just remember him waiting for mom to complete that ritual. As a matter of fact, I talk about it in my book, the first Afro pick in our family was actually a military fork
Mhm.
because Kiki's mom told my mom to use a military fork to pick out my hair to detangle it.
Mhm.
So my mom was on the front end of styling tools, thanks to
Okay,
the military.
that's right. She was progressive. She was progressive.
Yes. Mhm.
How many schools did you go to? How many places did you move as a child?
Well, as a child, I just remember Fort Gordon, Fort Stewart, and Fort Bragg, and that was Vietnam. And then, of course, Mississippi, when my dad went to Vietnam the first time. The second time he went, we had settled at Fort Bragg, so I didn't have to change schools, but just, maybe from the age of 4 or 5 or so, just moving back and forth because of his service. And he retired in 72. And by that time, stationed at Fort Bragg, we were able to stay in our home when he went to Vietnam the second time, Dominican Republic, and just every place else the 82nd deployed to.
Now, for those of you who are listening, there are a couple of cities that are no kidding foundational to the warrior culture. Fayetteville, North Carolina is one of those. It is an all-American city. It is home of the 82nd Airborne. It is, America's first responders. And so when a conflict happens, literally everyone in Fayetteville is affected. They're either in the military, they're military dependent, or they're married or very close friends to a military dependent or a service member. So it truly is, when you talk about America at war, America in conflict, Fayetteville is at the heart of that. So when you're
Yes.
at Fayetteville, is it E.E. Smith? Is it Pine Forest? Which one of the high schools, and how was that experience like for you?
Reed Ross was the high school, but
Okay.
I did start out at E.E. Smith, and that E.E. Smith they produce legends. Back then, I mean, E.E. Smith had a golf team, tennis team, and a few of its players played in the NFL and became coaches. And I went to E.E. Smith one year. They were known for their marching band. And because of busing, I graduated from Reed Ross.
Hmm.
And E.E. Smith and Reed Ross both have produced some of the nation's generals. And I'm just proud to say, especially from Reed Ross, where I graduated high school, I think there are two that I know, but we had quite a few students going to the military academies. I mean, I think because of the military community, we looked at life a little differently. A lot of us wanted to serve, we wanted to be just like our fathers. But for me as a woman, the Army was a challenge.
Hmm.
And I said, if I could be an officer, because my dad did not want me to go and enlisted. He said, you have to go to college. Fortunately, Army ROTC had opened up for women. So I was able to go to college. And 30 years later, after I graduated, I found out that I was the first African American to graduate from Appalachian State's Army ROTC program. At the time, I didn't know, didn't care. I just wanted the privilege and opportunity to become an officer in the military, because there's something that my father was especially proud of, because he had a hard time believing. He says, you can be an officer, because he'd never seen a black female officer. And
And
even
and
when I came,
and and I mean, when you talk about, that legacy, proud to serve, and never having seen a black female officer, especially one that goes to ROTC and then works their way up the traditional route, I mean, that was unheard of. We're going to go to a quick commercial for Bay of 40th, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what is it like to be a pioneer, a pioneering officer in the armies of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s.
It's the moment in your eyes when the future becomes clear.
40 years ago, a vision was born to break barriers, to celebrate brilliance.
The hopes of what's in reach.
From pioneers to innovators to tomorrow's dreamers, Baya has changed the landscape of STEM forever. Great minds, great people, great futures. Join us for Baya 40. Don't just watch history, be part of it. Baya, becoming everything you are.
Become everything you are.
Welcome back to the briefing room. You know, Bea Becoming Everything You Are is in our 40th year, and Bea is about pioneers. It's 50,000 people in this ecosystem of professionals and students who are all striving to be pioneers. My guest today, Colonel Edna Cummings, U.S. Army retired, is a pioneer. Her entire professional career is one that is transformative in the sense that she entered into the defense and service of the nation, which was her family business, raised as an Army brat on bases across the South, then goes into college for ROTC as one of the first women really in the country to get a commission through that Reserve Officer Training Course program, and then through Dakowitz, through inspiring people like Lieutenant Kara Holgren, and then into higher service and actually ultimately getting a movie for women veterans. So we're right now, we're at the beginning of that story. We're at the Reserve Officer Training Course at Appalachian State University. So go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead with that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, and I don't like to talk about age, but to add credibility and authenticity to my story, I have to go there. Women didn't get credit cards until 1974, and that was the year I entered college. And women just joined ROTC the year prior, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember when I went to the summer advance camp, my class was the second year that had women. And the academies came along a couple of years afterwards. But at the time, in retrospect, I think about what the 6888 commander, Charity Adams, said. You don't know it's history until somebody tells you that it's history. And so you just do what you think is right. You pursue your passion, and you just do the best job that you can, to use the old Army slogan, be all you can be. Just go for it until you cannot go anymore. And so that's just the attitude that I have always had. And one thing the Army taught me, you find a problem, you own the problem and figure out a solution. And that led me to the 6888 advocacy, because World War II, I never considered myself a historian. I loved history, but only certain aspects of it. But when I learned about the 6888, maybe in 2015, 2016, I had one of those aha moments. And the aha moment was during World War II, all of the movies, the stories, you never saw Black women represented. And then if women were represented in World War II, maybe a nurse, maybe, but they were always a love interest. It was never a woman actually performing, quote, an operational mission, aside from nurses, never contributing to the war, just on the sidelines supporting a man. But the story of the 6888 was just so powerful until I remember saying, if I have the opportunity to bring the story to the forefront or to highlight or amplify this story, that's something that I would do. So I began in 2018 raising funds for a monument. And then a documentary producer, James Fair, is also a veteran, had produced a documentary about the Hello Girls, World War I telephone operators who connected the calls for General Pershing. And he saw the similarities between the 6888 and the Hello Girls, both units of women who connected service members, vital connections, restored communications. But World War I, the women were not considered veterans until 1977. The 6888 were Women's Army Corps, full benefits, privileges, unlike any other unit that
it was literally history. I mean, as you said,
yes, you had nurses. That was a separate corps, the Army Nurse Corps, but you did not have non-nurse Black women overseas in any of the theaters of war. The Pacific Theater, European Theater, or the Forgotten Theater, the CBI, the China, Burma, India Theater. But you had nurses, but not anyone serving overseas. And there were more than 6,000 Black women on active duty during World War II. And no one ever talked about any of these women. So many of these women, not the 6888, but many of these women have been beaten, put in prison, court-martialed for standing up for the right to serve instead of being relegated to menial tasks.
Now, can you imagine that? I mean, I want to foot stomp that point, because during World War II, the Black newspapers, Black families knew that it was really a war on two fronts.
Yes.
One, of course, to defeat Hitler and fascism around the world, but two, to fight for your dignity every single day, multiple times a day, for veterans and service members for a country that you love. So, speak a little bit more about the 6,000. And then, Colonel, I didn't miss it, Colonel. You jumped from 1972 to 2015. We're gonna have to fill in that gap. But the highlighting those veterans, those World War II veterans, continue with that. What was it like for those 6,000 women, those 6,000 Black women?
Well, first of all, the 6888, they were not postal clerks. They were not trained postal clerks. But 85% of these women hand-selected from the women on active duty. Approximately, it was 6,000 total during World War II. And at one given time, there were a little over 3,500 on active duty. So from those Black women on active duty, 855 were selected and had to undergo psychological testing because they had to go overseas on an unknown mission. 85% were either college graduates or former school teachers. So you had the best and brightest in the nation. And that's significant because World War II was post-depression. The literacy level in the US, more than 60% of Americans did not have a high school diploma. And that is why it was even more remarkable that you got the best and brightest in the nation, regardless of race, regardless of gender. That's what the 6888 represented. And that for women had to have high school diplomas to join the military during that time. More than 150,000 women on active duty of all races.
So the standard, when we talk about, one of the purposes of the briefing room is talk about standards and raising the standards.
Right.
Those women, their standards were up here, and for the men, just barely read and write, no high school diploma.
Exactly. Required. So the women had to be better. And so you had the best and the brightest in the nation. I really think that when the 6888 went overseas and restored reliable mail operations for the European theater of war, it was empowering because so many of these women had freedoms and liberties overseas that they did not have in the US. Even though the military was still segregated, the Europeans welcomed the Americans and were so impressed by the 6888, they invite them to their homes for tea. But when these women returned to the US, they didn't get any type of recognition until we started what we were doing back in 2018. We were able to get a meritorious unit commendation, their only award for performance, along with the other basic awards, the Victory Medal, Overseas Service Medal, Women's Army Corps Medal. But we felt that they needed recognition for contributing to the Allied victory during World War II.
We're going to get back to the Allied victory and their contributions, which is going to be the highlight of kind of tying one woman's commitment, the commitment for Colonel Edna Cummings to make sure that veterans were recognized in partnership with, all kind of Republicans, Democrats, all kind of people. You pulled together a monster team to make this happen. So we're going to get right back to that after this commercial break.
Calling all future STEM pioneers, leaders, and career champions. Join us on every second Saturday of the month for the BEA Career Day. BEA STEM Career Day is all about creating opportunities for students to venture into the world of STEM through the eyes of professionals. You'll meet mentors and presenters that will give you a sneak peek into the many options available to you in the field of STEM. Hosted by teen ambassadors, you'll find yourself among inspiring peers just like yourself that are aiming high for their future. To take part in the BEA STEM Career Day on Zoom, visit fullstemahead.us and register for the next session. Again, that's fullstemahead.us. BEA, becoming everything you are.
A world of careers unleashed. You can get it at BEA. Become everything you are.
All right, welcome back to the briefing room. Colonel, we call all of the people who are listening Team BEA, Team Becoming Everything You Are. So can you give Team Bea the blueprint on how you go from first hearing about the 6888 in 2015 to where they are now in the national story?
Well, heard about the 6888. I'm a member of this organization called the Rocks. And I had heard about the 6888 roughly in 2015, just online, and the story popped up and it just stuck with me. Fast forward 2018, there was something that the Rocks is professional development organization for senior civilians and officers, and they were requesting funds to raise a monument to honor the 6888. I called the project director, a retired Navy commander, by the way, Carlton Philpott, and says, hey, how can I help bring this story to the forefront? How can I help raise money? So I thought I'll just go and participate in this beautiful monument project that's at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas now, home of the 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers in Buffalo Soldier Park. How could I help raise funds? And it's really, without sounding cliche, build it and they will come. We raised funds for this monument with the names of the women we knew of at the time, had a beautiful dedication. Senator Jerry Moran, was there, and he had been supporting, he's from Kansas. Senator Moran had been on the front end of the monument support, Buffalo Soldier support, anything about the Buffalo Soldier Park from the very beginning. And so I knew that he was the smartest person on Capitol Hill to tell the 6888 story. He'd worked with us to get the meritorious unit accommodation. And so that monument, people started paying attention. And the director and producer, Jim Theris with the Hello Girls, says, hey, let's do a documentary because we have to do something. So the story of the 6888 just touched everyone. And it was a casual conversation. Jim Theris says, hey, why not introduce Congressional Gold Medal? I'm like, okay.
Right. Just like that.
Like we're talking. We did it for the Hello Girls. Let's just maybe do it for the 6888. And I'd worked in the Pentagon, and Second Lieutenant 101, Pentagon 101, if you challenged to do something, if you're tasked to do something, you ask for the policy and the template.
That's right.
That's all, those two documents. So whomever is listening, you're new to an organization, just look at the existing policies and the current templates. That's a start point because you don't know what you don't know. So basically, I drafted the legislation, contacted Senator Moran's office, and fast forward, he said, are you talking to anyone else? I said, not yet, but I need this legislation introduced. He had it from the time, I think it was late December, actually, 2018. He introduced the legislation in February, less than 90 days. And that was the Senate side for the Congressional Gold Medal. And I was able to contact Representative Gwen Moore, because there's a 6888 family member who went to undergrad at Marquette University with Representative Gwen Moore. Cherie Robertson, her mother, Anna Mae Robertson, was in the 6888. Says, I need someone from the House to introduce this legislation. So you have a white male Republican, a black female Democrat working together from 2018 to get legislation introduced for these women. And that's my lesson. It's the messaging. Find that common ground. And yes, it was tough because a lot of people wondered why I was working with Senator Moran, and others was like, well, what's the deal with the 6888? They were just mail sorters. So we had to focus truly on performance. What is the 6888 did above and beyond the standard? And that's what storytelling becomes so important for veterans. Each veteran story, to you listeners, is a page of military history. Look at your awards and all those things that you did above and beyond the call of duty. You're contributing and have contributed to military history. And that's the approach that I took. And
there's so many hidden stories.
Right.
So many hidden stories. And so you took that approach, and then what happened?
We just took that approach, and I used the military approach, a multi-pronged attack.
Okay.
because you have different populations who exactly. We had it was a grassroots. We didn't have an organization because I just thought that would waste too much time in my mind, because we had these women in their 90s. We want as many of them to understand and be appreciated. We engaged the families, letter writing campaigns, organizations, letter of support, organizations who had a legislative arm like MOA, Military Officers Association. They took the 6888 as part of their legislative agenda. So did the Association of U.S. Army. So same
So
purpose, different
you
messaging,
went all in. I mean, you went
all
all
in.
these procedures and then all
That's
in.
right.
You got everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how we got it done. Just great storytelling, facts, performance, above and beyond, and just grinding. And then I took the time, I was able, through the Afro newspaper, had listed the cities where these women were from. I mapped the cities to congressional districts. And when I would send an email to a legislator on the House side, the Senate side was easy because it's just state. House members wanted to know were any of these women from my district. First time around, the bill passed the Senate, didn't pass the House, and COVID happened. But we said, no, we have momentum. And once I found that information, it took me a couple of days, but I mapped as many of those women as possible, over 700, to congressional districts. And so my message was, dear Representative, whomever, to the legislative director, World War II Congressional Gold Medal for District 12, the attention getter, the bottom line up front. That is the Army way. And that's how we got it done. And sometimes just from an email, and not, knocking on the door. Sometimes I did have to knock on doors when, the house was open. Just from an email, that storytelling, bottom line up front, focus on performance, I was able to get a co-sponsor. And remembering the civics class, 2/3 from the House, 2/3 from the Senate, co-sponsors.
Edna, I ought to charge people just for that last minute of what you said. That is the blueprint. So if you are a Vietnam era veteran, a Korea era veteran, and you know a group of incredible Americans whose performance has not been documented, you need to replay that portion, the last 5 minutes of this show, because I can tell you, I'm going to tell my own children, there's 400 Black aviators who have come through since Ensign Jesse L. Brown flew for the Navy. And I'm going to say, document the people.
That's right.
Reach out to the legislatures. Make sure there's alignment to communities. Make sure there's sustained superior performance. Make sure it contributed to the nation. So those, that ought to sell that portion right there.
Well, I want my cut. It's a unifying theme. And I like to say, in summary, how could I characterize our efforts? And it was a grassroots efforts, people throughout the world, because I had contacts in France, contacts in England. Just throughout in places. I even did a session with the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. We had people throughout the world embracing this story, and it's a unifying theme. And so the 6888 restored reliable and vital communications during World War II. And they did it again by bringing our nation together. If only for a moment, there are some things that we can't agree on.
Wow. There are some things we can't agree on.
Yes.
As there's a part of your story that's kind of woven in there. And as a result of your efforts, can you tell the audience a little bit, Team Bea, about Dakowitz and what, and, I was in CAG 11, so I was there for Lieutenant Kara Holgren. So I want you to just talk a little bit about that experience at Dakowitz and the ability to inspire military service women in uniform.
All right, I'll tell this story about Kara Holgren. Dakowitz is Defense Advisory Committee of Women in the Service. And when I was at the Pentagon, I was a Dakowitz liaison for the Army Reserve. So we would go to these meetings. And one session in particular with Dakowitz, I was with these naval women, these women officers. They were all 03s and 04s, I believe. And I started talking with them, and they wanted the opportunity to become fighter pilots or to fly. I'm not sure of the aircraft, but it was something that was restricted. And so this amazing woman, about 5'10", just, I think she lived in the gym. And years later, I learned her call sign was, I think, Lady Hulk or something. And so we were in this meeting with I think he was the chief of staff for the Air Force, General McPeak. And so there was discussion about these naval aviators and women. And he said something to the effect, I don't think that women should fly, it's my socialization. And I was sitting beside Kara, and we just had this great session, talking. And she stood up, and I remember she either grabbed my hand or I grabbed hers, because she was just went all in. She said, "Sir, have you ever flown with the female pilot? How could you say that?" And now you made me think about, that's similar to what Charity Adams did to the general when she said, "Over my dead body."
That's right.
Kara at the time was probably in 2003, standing up to this 4-star general, says, "How dare you insult women like that? You've never flown with them." And the room silenced, and he kind of backed down a little bit, says, "Well, that's just the way I was raised." And afterwards, everyone says, "We will protect you, Kara," because they knew that she would get some type of, reprisal or retribution or something, because of her courage to challenge the status quo. Fast forward, the naval women were able to fly, and unfortunately, Kara did crash her aircraft on the carrier. And that just, touched me. And I just didn't realize the connection till you said it. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I was, how small the world is.
Right.
My first air wing, the CAG-11, had numerous aircraft mishaps in 1994 and 95. It wasn't just the F-14 off of the Abraham Lincoln with Lieutenant Kara Holgren and her Rio. It was also VAQ-135, which was the squadron I ended up going to. So that air wing in that time period, had a number of aircraft mishaps. When I got there, they call her Revlon. So
that's Revlon. Yeah, she also called her Revlon because she wore that red. And we kept in touch, but that was a connection to Charity Adams that just kind of was one of those aha moments. So that's the power, I think, and because I have to jump off, of storytelling, because you realize connections that you would not otherwise realize. And Kara and I, we probably kept in touch a little afterwards, because I wanted to make sure she was okay. And at the time, I think I ranked them. I was a major, 04. And she was like, "Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." And I just never forgot her. And I was saddened to hear about her death.
I mean, she is, I'm so glad we had a chance to talk about her. There's so many of us in naval aviation that she was a hero to and an inspiration. They have no idea the isolation that it took for her to be one of 5 out of 200, the only one that's in a fighter squadron. So when you talk about alone and unafraid, that was her. Like I say, I entered the air wing immediately after she was gone, but I heard from all sides about her story. And the universal consensus for her was that she's very courageous.
Yes.
And things that she did are inspiring, just by being alone and unafraid and being the first. So with that, Colonel, we got to have you back. I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna take parts of this show. We're gonna chop it up. The production team is already hard at work. We're gonna bring in A Soldier's Life, which is the book. So go to Amazon, buy her book, get it autographed. I also want you to, Team Bea, to go to the documentary. Take a look at the documentary and support Colonel Edna Cummings. I don't know what your next adventure is. Probably, working with, Windsor Group and doing big things, changing the world. So, but thank you, ma'am.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're going to go to a commercial and be right back.
In today's rapidly changing workforce landscape, finding the right talent isn't just about filling positions. It's about building the future. But with new policies shaping how organizations approach recruitment, companies and institutions need a smarter way to connect with top STEM talent, fairly, effectively, and compliantly. That's That's where CCG Job Match comes in. For more than 30 years, Career Communications Group has been bridging the gap between education and industry. Job Match is our workforce development program that links employers with thousands of qualified, motivated candidates, students and professionals ready to make an impact. With Job Match, companies gain access to a broad pool of skilled applicants, engineers, technologists, innovators, while ensuring every hiring decision is based on merit. No quotas, no preferences, just opportunity and talent matched with precision. Education partners benefit too, helping their graduates transition seamlessly into the workforce while showcasing the strength of their academic programs to leading employers nationwide. In a world where policies may change, one thing remains constant: the need for great talent. CCG Job Match is where industries, institutions, and innovation meet. Let's build the future together. Contact us at CCG Job Match to start your partnership today.
All right, welcome back to the briefing room. What an inspiring session with Colonel Edna Cummings. She gave you the blueprint, its policies, procedures. It's telling your story in an impactful way about how sustained superior performance makes a difference. So if you're a CEO, student, executive, that was inspirational. My co-host, Dr. Tyrone Taborn, and I seek each week to bring you the best that the world has to offer. We're starting with the military because we believe that the warrior culture permeates everything that you do in life. We also want to bring you the news. And so the session Around the World in 10 minutes, I'm going to go around the world and give you my perspective as a former briefer to senior admirals and generals on what is going on in the world. So let's start with South America, Venezuela. Currently, the United States has the largest armada ever assembled in the Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela. What are they doing there? Well, what they're doing is the official policy is that they're enforcing drug interdiction and also enforcing sanctions against illegal or an unauthorized transportation of goods and monies that have been sanctioned by the United States. Now, what does sanctioned means? Sanction means that if you are a ship, a person, a business, or an entity that has ever done anything, any business with Iran, North Korea, Libya for a time, Iraq for a time, you're on this list, and it's called the sanctions list. And there are people and boats and ships and airplanes and Bureau numbers that are on this sanctions list. And so what the United States is doing currently in Venezuela is, off the coast of Venezuela, is they're enforcing the sanctions list. And so there are oil tankers that have moved what they call black market oil around the world, to Iran, from Iran to China, from Venezuela to certain places. And those ships that are on that sanctioned list are being boarded and being escorted away from Venezuela. Whether you're coming into Venezuela or leaving Venezuela, if you're on that sanctions list, you cannot go into Venezuela. Otherwise, you're subject to interdiction by U.S. forces. If you are a ship that's chartered in Liberia or the United States, if you're working with Chevron, which is a multinational corporation based here in the U.S., then that oil is allowed to continue to transit. So that's kind of what's going on in Venezuela. Let's fast forward to Europe. Last week, President Vladimir Putin had a briefing with his defense ministers, and he said, quote unquote, the little pigs. And when he said the little pigs, he was referencing the European leaders and their attacks on their perceived attacks on him and his actions in the Ukraine. He has made it very clear to his defense ministers last week, and really consistently throughout, is that Russia is fully committed through either diplomatic means or force means or both to take over all of the regions and parts of Ukraine that have citizens with any ties, historic ties to Russia. That includes the eastern part of Ukraine called the Donbass region, and that is where the conflict is at. So my analysis is we see no end in sight. I think that analysis is shared by most people, that no end in sight unless a U.S. brokered peace deal can be had between the Kremlin and the folks in Kiev represent the Ukrainian side. All right, now let's go down to Africa. Right now in the African region, the biggest story that's not being told here in the United States is M23. The M23 story is critical because many of the raw metals and materials that are in the cell phones and computers come out of the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The DRC has been in conflict for many, many years. It's bordered by Rwanda. It has Hutus and Tutsis. And the M23 movement is a group of military people and civilians. It's a revolutionary organization in the Congo that's there to protect the Tutsi population from discrimination, from attacks, from all kind of things that are being perpetrated against it, allegedly perpetrated against it by the government there in the DRC. They are purportedly to be sponsored by Rwandan, the Rwandan military, Rwandan logistics, Rwandan money. So when you hear M23, that is the group that they're talking about. And M23 stands for March 23rd. It is the day that the peace accord was signed. So it is ironic in a sad way that so many of the conflicts in the world tie their mission and their purpose to peace summits and deals that were supposed to lead to peace. As we travel to Gaza, Gaza is experiencing a winter storm. There are Palestinian children who are dying and freezing. There are still restrictions of supplies that are coming into out of Gaza. And so, as warriors, we need to keep a close eye on that so that we can make sure that we can do whatever we can do to alleviate any humanitarian crisis, no matter your politics on what's going on in Gaza. We can all agree that there is never a time for children and non-combatants to be suffering or involved in the conflicts that we as members and men and women at arms have given our life to be in this profession. All right, let's go to Asia. So in Asia, cyclones and rough weather continue to pound Indonesia. There's a new cyclone seed, which for Americans is kind of like out in the Atlantic when a hurricane is coming its way through the Caribbean, off the middle of the Atlantic. That is what a cyclone seed is, and Indonesia is bracing as new cyclone seeds are forming in the Pacific and then heading towards Indonesia. It has already been soaked, it's already been pounded by one cyclone, and they don't want another cyclone to hit. So we'll keep an eye, a very, very close eye on that. So that is around the world in 10 minutes. We're going to go to a commercial break. I want you all to hear more about our 40th annual BEA so that you can come and be a part of this ecosystem.
Calling all future STEM pioneers, leaders, and career champions. Join us on every second Saturday of the month for the BEA Career Day. BEA STEM Career Day is all about creating opportunities for students to venture into the world of STEM through the eyes of professionals. You'll meet mentors and presenters that will give you a sneak peek into the many options available to you in the field of STEM. Hosted by teen ambassadors, you'll find yourself among inspiring peers just like yourself that are aiming high for their future. To take part in the BEA STEM Career Day on Zoom, visit fullstemahead.us and register for the next session. Again, that's fullstemahead.us. BEA, becoming everything you are.
A world of careers unleashed. You can get it at BEA. Become everything you are.
All right, welcome back to the briefing room. What is a BEA? You hear me talk about Team BEA. You hear me talk about Dr. Tyrone Taborn and the work that we've done for 40 years, building an ecosystem of 50,000 plus active members Bea is becoming everything you are. It's the reason why this show exists. The mission of Bea Stars and Stripes and why we brought, hundreds of admirals and generals together is simple. It's one mission: to inspire the next generation of Americans to become scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians. You cannot fight wars if you're not the smartest people in the room. So Bea Stars and Stripes' mission is to get those high school and college students who are the smartest people in their rooms into service to nation. We need your support to do that. So as you're listening to this show, if you've never been to a Bea, if you've never been to the Stars and Stripes, you need to come to Baltimore, February 13th through 15th. Join the ecosystem, join the movement to keep America at the forefront of the world by using science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, Team Bea, if you're listening, you're already a part of Team Bea. We have a 24/7 2D metaverse. We have a high school and college career day. So if you're a parent with children I call them children, young adults in high school or college, you need to be listening to the career day, which is on the second Saturday of every month. We have mentoring, and you have heard the importance of mentors in every single one of these briefing room interviews. Every CEO, every billionaire, every professional athlete will talk to you about the importance of mentorship. If you don't have a mentor, you need to be at the Becoming Everything You Are conference, February 13th through 15th. I guarantee you will find your mentor there. If not, find me with the hat, and I will personally connect you to a mentor. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're a CEO. I don't care if you're a high school student. You can find your mentor at Becoming Everything You Are conference. The next thing I want to talk about is my own personal, what happened to Matt last week. So I'm going to close with the Matt segment. So last week I had the opportunity to go down to Miami for the retirement and relinquishment of command for Admiral Alvin Halsey. And I've known Admiral Halsey since 1994 when I was a student in Pensacola. He's a great American. You can read the posts about his leadership and his judgment. And they just had a wonderful ceremony for him celebrating 37 years. So to Admiral Halsey and to his family, we wish you fair winds and following seas. We know that wherever life takes you, you take God with you. You also take Georgia with you. I mean, I think you closed out with heading back to Georgia at your retirement ceremony. So for those of us who are in the Becoming Everything You Are community, I want to close this show by saying that this show is about raising standards. Admiral Halsey, you continue to raise our standards for what it means to be an ethical, servant-oriented leader and to show us the way. So with that, we'll see you next week on the Briefing Room.
What if you could build your own city? A place where every child can find nurturing people to help them achieve their full potential. A place where every adult can access job training support. Where health education is abundant. Where social justice ruled the land. A place without limitations. Welcome. You have arrived at STEM City, USA. It is what every city should be. A safe and trusted community where you find people and resources to help you become everything you are and beyond. STEM City is unlike anything you have ever experienced. It is a digital twin of the world around you, only better. STEM City is about energy and soul renewal. It is more than a digital world. You can almost feel the power of live cultural events, music, and theater. STEM City promises a better future for children, with caring mentors and hands-on activities, with dedicated tutors to support our youth. STEM City is your passport to a healthy lifestyle, with weekly events addressing our community's many issues. STEM City is your financial well-being, with helpful information on wealth management, career advancement, job training, and so much more. STEM City is the community you deserve. It is the city where your dreams can come true. STEM City USA, a place in the sky that is accessible to all who reach for the stars.